use these big words. Now, I'm always scared to say the words that we're trying to disassemble the patriarchy, because when you use big words like that, especially the word patriarchy, it definitely throws into people's minds. It throws into people's minds that I am a kind of what's perpetrated by the media. I feel like an angry feminist.
Mm-hmm.
You see those like cartoons of the girls with short blue hair, and they have shirts that say down with the patriarchy. And it's when we say down with the patriarchy, it does not mean we want men out of power. It is that the patriarchy is the idea that only men are in power. And so when we say down with the patriarchy, we don't mean we don't want men in power. It means that we also want women in power. And so, as I said, I'm so hesitant to use the word patriarchy because I think to many people, it lowers my credibility.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. And not only that, it's a very emotional word. It has so many negative connotations on both sides, but obviously in different ways, but it's a very loaded term. And so what do you think, I mean, for example, do you think that increasing things like men's mental health, right? Because right now part of the issue is I think a lot of men think in terms of cold hard logic. But the world does not run on cold, hard logic. If the world ran on cold, hard logic, nobody would drink champagne or, go into the ocean because those things are unsafe and illogical. But we're not running on cold, hard logic. We're human. We're only human. And it would be a really boring, sterilized, kind of unfun world if we were. And so I think the first step to getting them to understand feminism is to get them to understand empathy and that other form of reasoning, emotional reasoning, which a lot of them simply do not have.
I 100% agree, and while you were saying that, I was thinking, I'm not going to sit here and be like, men don't have empathy. I don't think that's what it is, but I think that the skill of empathy is ingrained in women's brains from such a young age, especially because they see their mothers and their sisters and the women on the news. They see these women going through things, and not only do they understand that these are things they will have to go through, but they feel for their fellow women, and they understand that empathy from a very young age. And so I also do think that is also why you see a lot more women nowadays are being increasingly more and more left-leaning, and that I feel has to do with how when we think of the Democrat Party, those are much more social program based. And so I think, and I say that as someone who is surprisingly more middle ground than I think people think of me as, because I think people think of me as raging liberal. But the thing is, I completely understand the use of putting a good economy before social programs, because we wouldn't be able to put in social programs without the funds to do so. So if one has to come first, I think having a stable economy is the part that, as long as we are still understanding that the end goal is these social programs and that the stable economy is what we need in the meantime, I think that's what's important. And I'm getting off on a little side tangent there.
No, that makes sense. And that's fine. A lot of people think that forget that the government is made to serve the people, and governments derive their power from the consent of the governed, and they think that we should that we should do things for our country, and by that they usually mean the people in power. But that's just weird. It just reinforces a weird power balance. So anyways, I digress. Do you think that to your point, you said that women are getting more left, and I also think that men, from my experience, are getting more right. Why do you think that is?
I do think that has to do with, I mentioned earlier, of just kind of, I think part of it, there's some argument that part of it is biological, but I also do think that a large part of it is social when I say that women are more empathetic and not necessarily emotional, but value and evaluate the emotions of others, while men tend to focus more on logic. And that doesn't mean that men aren't emotional and women aren't logical, but I think part of it is some kind of genetic disposition, and I think part of it is also how being socialized as a woman may make you more empathetic as a person.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, it's a deeply, deeply unnatural thing, the way that women are being socialized in our current society, and that your frontal lobe is not finished developing until you're 25. So, like, you can do things like reminisce and, like, metacognition, right? And that sort of, like, empathy and, like, more complicated tasks of cognition when you're younger, they're going to be more metabolically expensive. So, like, when you're 25, maybe you'll be using, like, half the glucose. And so, to force, women to, like, have to, you at a younger age, like 8 years old, to force them to have to use these skills, like very, very complicated cognitive skills, is in my opinion not natural at all. It's deeply, deeply unnatural. I think there's nothing natural about the patriarchy at all. I mean, it's vestigial. It used to serve some function, but at this point, it's and in a lot of ways, it's just wrong.
See, so for me, I think that's such an interesting point, because I think that this shows, like, how we can have the same conclusion, but get there by two very different ways. Because what I'm thinking, and I think that is just so beautiful, the way that, like, it's so similar yet different. What I'm thinking is kind of the opposite. Almost not that, that it is unnatural that women have to use these cognitive skills at a young age, but instead that it would be better if everybody had to use these cognitive skills from a young age. Because I think that, we get to that conclusion, at this age, where we're like, how can we make men more empathetic and make them understand that not only it's not about the fact that they are benefiting from feminism, but also just about caring for others. I think that could be solved if we see the correlation of women are the ones who are being more empathetic at this age, and part of that is because they are the ones who are using these cognitive skills earlier, and we see that men aren't, and it's because they're not using these cognitive skills earlier. And so the question, I understand where you're saying of, like, it may not be natural to have that, but I wonder, would it be better instead of neither if it was both?
That's a very, very, like, interesting, like you said, like, very elegant way of thinking. I think that, honestly, the issue is not that we are using these cognitive skills. Obviously, it's very good that we're having, like, younger kids, build up those skills, right? The issue is that with if you look at, like, you know this better than me, if you look at most teenage girls and most younger girls, they are using up so much energy and like emotional bandwidth, trying to fit in, and that comes from a deeply ingrained social sort of, like, this, right? When I was a kid, if I acted out, when I acted out a lot, I had, like, big problems. So when I acted out, a lot of times it was seen as, like, oh, that's just Micah. A lot of times it was seen as, oh, he's just, like, a boy. And sometimes, and a lot of times it was also seen as, oh, you gotta, like, it was redirected. And I'm very grateful that a lot of times it was redirected, because that has made me the person I am. Now, I firmly believe that if I was a woman, those behaviors, like acting out, would be seen as, like, unfeminine, and, like, they'd be redirected much more harshly, and people would look at me strangely, and I would feel, like, these feelings of shame, and, associate that shame with these behaviors. And so, women are much less likely to be kind of, like I don't want to say unhinged, but, like, I guess unhinged is a spectrum.
Yeah. I don't mean to jump in here, but I think that this is so perfect, because I actually just finished my psychology class's paper, and actually this is exactly what I wrote on. I evaluated why autism spectrum disorder is at less rate, is diagnosed at a significantly smaller rate in women than men.
Yeah, why is that?
I have a couple hypotheses that and I'm happy to send you my paper. I'd
love to read it.
I loved writing it and doing the research behind it. And to me, it seems to come down to two main things. One, actually, we're going to say three main things. One, that the criteria Well, actually, it does kind of come down to two main things, doesn't it? But I'm kind of combining two of them. One, that the criteria for, autism spectrum disorder and neurodiverse disorders in general is very male-centric and very outdated. And additionally, symptoms present very differently in women and men. And so these diagnostic classifications are built around the symptoms that present more commonly in men. And so you're seeing women get diagnosed less because when you think of, for example, a boy with ADHD, somebody with an ADHD, the poster child is, a boy who can't sit still in class and blurts out answers, has a bunch of energy. But the interesting thing is the other person in the class who has just as a severe ADHD as him is the girl who sits in the back of class and reads the whole time and gets distracted on topics that interest her and has a hard time socializing and becomes overwhelmed very easily. They have just the same level of ADHD, yet only one of them will be diagnosed from an early age. And statistically, women are far more likely to not only get recognized far less. In fact, I remember reading, it was super interesting, if a teacher did not notice, had no concern for the student, the patient's behavior surrounding autism spectrum disorder, it was 16 times more likely to be a patient who was a woman than a man.
Ooh, okay. So that's crazy. The fact that the teacher's concern is a predictor of gender.
Exactly. It is so interesting. But the other interesting thing is that even for the women who, with their neurodivergent behaviors, come out, and I'm so happy you brought this up because this is exactly what I just spent 2 weeks researching, is these behaviors that, if it was a woman who was, couldn't sit still in her chair and was blurting out, those traits are essentially almost socially beaten out of women at a young age for, as you said, being unladylike. Blurting out isn't ladylike, it's not polite, but men are very, very less commonly told that it's important to be polite. Men, especially in early education, it's taught that, leadership is important and, be taking charge and being, being a go-getter and achieving those goals and being creative. While women, it's much more about being, as it all rolls back to, being empathetic and being, kind and thinking about others. And so even if those traits are present in women, which they're very commonly not because they present themselves, it presents differently in women and men, even if they are, those traits are socially beat out of them earlier. So those women go very long in life without ever getting a diagnosis. And that's why you see women in their 30s and 40s and even later finally getting autism diagnoses, because they never got a teacher or parents who. And that's not necessarily the fault of parents or teachers. It's
the fault of it's a structural issue.
Exactly, it 100% is.
And on that regard, so we can diagnose the problem all we'd like, but what I want to know is, once we've diagnosed the problem, because I think a lot of guys are simply unaware. A lot of guys genuinely do not know or do not believe that this is the experience of women, or do not care. And so what do you even, if it's a not believing thing, okay, you can tell them about it and maybe they still won't believe you. In that case, not much you can do. But, what I think might be the solution is do you think, and I want to hear your thoughts, do you think just funding men's mental health and putting in programs to make men more, do you think that that avenue might be worth exploring, or where do we even go?
I definitely think it is. So as I said, big proponent of men's mental health here, because women are often seen as more emotional, and I think men would be seen as equally as emotional if they had the opportunity to share those emotions. But the thing is, you say, what can we do about it? And I think one of the biggest things is having these conversations, and that's why I'm so happy that, you were so eager to let me be here and talk about this, is because it is these conversations that are so, so important. You're right, there is an aspect of the guys who simply don't believe, but I think the interesting thing is that the aspect of don't believe comes from a misunderstanding of what feminism is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I truly believe that many men who don't like feminism are scared of, and it's not that they don't like it is because they are scared of the idea that if women came to power, they would treat men the way that men have treated women for centuries. I truly believe that that is part of the reason why some men don't like feminism. But the reality is that that's not the case. It's not that we want to put women in power and take the men out of power. That's what we were discussing earlier when it came to the patriarchy, is that it's not about removing the men from power. It's that it's adding those female voices, especially in places where women need to be, surrounding, as we said, conversations about our own bodies. And I think that it's a misdirection of and a misunderstanding of what feminism is, and that is where I'll think a lot of the issue of whether men support feminism or not comes from. You're right, there is obviously still that empathy issue, but I think the guys who simply don't like it is because they don't understand what it truly means, and they hear the louder voices of, they hear the louder voices of the very radical feminists. And I mentioned to you before we started this. I will never blame those louder radical feminists, because I don't think
they're fed up.
Exactly. I don't think that blaming women for the shortcomings of feminism in a world that is built against them is the right choice. And additionally, I truly believe that, as you mentioned, they're fed up. I remember I thought about this the other day, and I wrote it down because I thought it was just so interesting, that I think that these loud women that we are hearing now, it is the voices of all the women in history who have not had the chance to speak, coming through in these new generations that are finally have the ability to do so. And if that comes out loud, that's going to scare people away, but I don't think that means that we need to stop being loud.
I agree. I also think that when I speak to my guy friends who are not feminists, which when I tell some of my girlfriends who are feminists, that I have guy friends who aren't, they're like, why? And I think part of the issue is that most guys are simply not feminists, and they don't understand, and they're not mature enough to understand. And for me, I have this weird choice between not being friends with these people, and they see me as oh, this guy, this radical feminist is not friends with me because it pushes them deeper and deeper into this hole. And so a lot of times when we call out misogyny, it doesn't do anything. It has no functional purpose, because guys who are being misogynistic, they
know they're being misogynistic.
Maybe not. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't call it that. But what I do know is that calling it misogyny, it's a very loaded word. It's a very word that makes them emotional.
And it makes them defensive.
And it makes them defensive, and it makes them fearful. Exactly. And it pushes them deeper and deeper and deeper in the hole. So yes, while saying oh, dude, you're being so misogynistic right now, shut the fuck up, would be I would love to say that. I know that it's not the right thing to do.
And I can't expect men to burn bridges with the people that they love for the sake of women. Now
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One more thing. Sorry, I do not mean to interrupt.
Totally fine.
What the main point that I was going to get at though was that I think that a big issue what I see when I hear guys talking about feminism is usually it's not women can't be leaders. It's that they feel that maybe not, but they feel that merit-based positions are important, and so in some sense, and so they feel that having positions based on what I think they feel that what feminism does is it takes merit-based positions and it just gives them to women just because they're women, when what we should be focusing on, I think, is finding those people like Marie Curie and those voices that would be amazing proponents of STEM and science and reading and culture, but are not because they're women. It's not just giving them a platform because they're women, it's giving them a platform because they're people.
Exactly.
And it's merit-based.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it is when they see this, they go, oh, well, women have the ability to do it now, so why aren't there women, in these
or like there's no like
leadership
laws
roles?
like preventing them from doing
Exactly.
it. But how do you even explain that to somebody?
It's because it's no longer, we're very thankful that it's no longer a legal barrier. But it doesn't mean it's not a social barrier. There's still going to be, women are still going to have a harder time getting to these positions, especially leadership roles. And it's been proven time and time again that men have no more like psychological and cognitive abilities than women. Men are no smarter than women, and that they measure up equally when given the right amount of potential and the right amount of resources. And the answer is that women are simply offered far less resources. And so when people, I think you're right, people get worried. They think that they see, especially that, they see a woman in power and they think, oh, somebody must have had to put her there. Because maybe they even understand that women don't have the resources to get there. So maybe they see that and they go, clearly someone had to put her there, because I know I live in a society, whether they realize it or not, they know they live in a society where a woman could not feasibly get to that position with the resources that she is offered.
Yeah, and I mean, also part of it is difficult because, like, it's very difficult to verbalize these systemic issues like systemic racism and feminism, because for that reason, like, it's not a legal barrier. And it's so how, like, I guess what I'm asking is, like, it's very difficult to explain to somebody like the issue of like women, like why women, it's difficult for a woman to become president without going to specific stories. And then if you tell them like a specific story, they're like, oh, that's just anecdotal evidence.
They always say that. They do always say that. Oh, that's just one example. But I keep bringing up just one more example.
Yeah, but I think that's because like the issue is you can't like a priori go to, it's a systemic issue, but the issue is like we can't actually explain the systemic issue without giving you examples. Like, it's very difficult to in a linear way to make an argument about these systemic issues, because these issues are systemic. They're not linear at all.
Exactly. It's an issue, when you have an argument, you have evidence behind it. And the evidence is often anecdotes. These are examples, and the examples are what is the basis of an argument. And people say, well, these are just examples. These aren't, this isn't, facts. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, what do you think a fact is?
Well, okay, I understand what they're saying. They're looking for something a priori, like logical, like you start from this premise that we both agree on, and then you follow you follow like what follows until you get to some like conclusion. So the issue is that there are no shared premises.
Exactly.
So like they're looking for like a generalized model of like this issue, and you can just give it to them. You can just say like, okay, a lot of times, for example, women, there is this like social pressure for women to be more ladylike from a very young age, and so that means that this will happen, and maybe they'll agree that there is that social pressure, and
then you have to keep building it step by step.
Yeah, and it's difficult because that's not a very natural way to go about explaining the issue, because it's,
And I think this circles back very strongly with exactly what we were talking about earlier with the empathy versus logical. Mm-hmm. Because the way that, we're saying, to go about it, I believe that the lived experiences of so many women is proof.
Yeah.
I think that is fact in itself. But you're right. They want to hear the logical step by step. And I think everything seems to come back to, our whole idea of getting men involved in empathy early.
Yeah. And for them to be able, because if, I firmly believe the unexamined life is not worth living. I think you should live in the moment, but I also think sometimes you take a step back and like analyze your assumptions. Too much of either is not good.
Exactly. It's always a healthy balance,
yeah.
Right?
And so I think that part of that is like a lot of this intellectual like conversation and this like deeper conversation derives from that introspection and derives from empathy. Like, you don't just get to like thinking about like legacy as some abstract concept. No, you think about your legacy, and that leads you to thinking about it as an abstract concept, and that leads you to asking like, what is legacy? Like, why do we care about it so much as a society?
And I
like,
also, sorry, continue.
Yeah, we think of it as like this, like a lot of people think of it as just this dry, like boring, like blah, 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 blah. But no, like the smartest people I know tend to also be very emotionally in tune, at least like verbal IQ wise.
Exactly. I think people think IQ, right? People always think IQ, and the reality is, outside of the fact that an IQ test is not a good example of intelligence in the first place, even then, if we go beyond that, you see people with high IQs but low what we call EQ, emotional quotients, where we see these low EQs, and it's not people when you think of somebody who is highly intelligent but not emotionally intelligent. I think people often think specifically of neurodivergent folks, especially people who are autistic. But the reality is, people with autism are far more, especially in women, far more emotionally in tune than your average person is. And I think that, back to what you're saying about legacy, is I think not only is introspection super important, but I also think that, you know, we look at what we've done and where we've come from, and we see, you know, at this given moment, what legacy would I have left if I disappeared from this spot right as I am? And I think that dictates our future actions as well, because it says it's a self schema as well. Another you know, great psychological term of how we view ourselves, and, you know, also this word is thrown around so much, and I'm finally so happy to properly understand it. Cognitive dissonance. The difference of our actions and our thought process. And the ability to say, you know, this is the legacy that I want to leave, and make changes in our actions based off of that legacy, I think is so important.
Yeah, no, 100%. I guess my point was not so about legacy, like, as a concept in itself, but more that, like, like what you're saying, what people sometimes think of as dry, philosophical, like boring, like topics are not dry at all. You just, like, in my opinion, podcasting is like the ultimate form of philosophy, because like with the like platonic dialogue like written down, that's kind of like clean, it's revised, but conversations like this, like, you know, they're not linear at all, like I said before, and you know, to circle back to the feminism issue, like, we're talking about a system. We're talking about a bunch of interconnected parts where there is no like starting point. Now, if you think of something like an argument, time only moves forwards. So when I make an argument to you, I can't, like, you know, show you the whole picture. I have to, like, sort of, you know, give you anecdotes, and I need to. It's a very difficult thing to do. You just, like, in my opinion, podcasting is like the ultimate form of philosophy, because like with the like platonic dialogue like written down, that's kind of like clean, it's revised, but conversations like this, like, you know, they're not linear at all, like I said before, and to, you know, to circle back to the feminism issue, like, we're talking about a system. We're talking about a bunch of interconnected parts where there is no like starting point. Now, if you think of something like an argument, time only moves forwards. So when I make an argument to you, I can't, like, you know, show you the whole picture. I have to, like, sort of, you know, give you anecdotes, and I need to. It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's even harder to do when you're writing like an essay, or when you're, which you should check out my blog, micahsaaron.com.
Self promo. Go check it out.
But with podcasting, like, you can kind of like loop back to what you said, and it's much easier, in my opinion. I think that's what Plato, like, if Plato had podcasts, like,
he would have been so good.
He would have been goated, yeah.
I also think that not only is it this kind of friendly, chill setting that helps facilitate these conversations, but also another thought that, you know, has crossed my mind. This is, you know, as we said, like, it loops back around, and, you know, we started with feminism, and we've ended, you know, we've gotten here with philosophy. When I think philosophy, I'll be honest, I'm not one to necessarily be super into philosophy, because I think of that dry philosophy, and so I do have this question for you that's kind of, it's been in my mind for the last couple minutes. I think part of it is I feel that many areas of philosophy lack emotion. and a lack that empathy. You think of the who am I, who are we, the philosophy area, but I often feel that some of it overlooks the human experience of emotion. And so my question for you is, do you feel that philosophy is emotional, or do you think that it should be?
I think that it takes something that's very emotional for us, and I think that it takes, for example, if you think of like the myth of Sisyphus. Do you know Camus?
Sisyphus, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I love Albert Camus. I loved The Stranger.
Oh, okay. So have you read the myth of Sisyphus?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so like, he starts it with like, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Determining whether or not life is or is not worth living amounts to solving the most fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, my bad, I just was flexing.
Honestly, that is so interesting, and like, I love that you're so passionate about it.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had to like, I had to flex there, with the fact that I had that memorized. But like, I guess his point is that, like, if life is meaningless, then what do you do? Like, and if it is, should you kill yourself? Like genuinely, and there's a lot of emotion in that question. It's a very loaded, deeply emotional question. And so, unfortunately, like, to do philosophy, we need to remove our emotion from it a little bit, just so that we can think clearly, but tying it back into our lives. Like, philosophy is all about how to live a good life, and how to, what to do in certain situations, and what is
how we know what we know.
How we know what we know, exactly. So if you think of something like epistemology,
I love epistemology.
Epistemology, sorry. If you think of something like epistemology, like, that isn't, to me, a very that's more of just like intellectually driven, and ontology too. But versus something like virtue, ethics, and that sort of thing, that is more driven by introspection. Although I do firmly believe you can get to epistemology and ontology and metaphysics from this like introspection. Like, there's this meme, the meme that's like, everyone says Plato is so smart, but like, I would have figured all that out if I was like the 20th person ever.
Yeah. That's so real.
Yeah, like, so Plato, I'm sure, like, thought, he and Socrates too, like, they introspected, they thought about their lives, and that's how they came to, like, that, like, a lot of times people come to me and they ask me for advice, like, on, like, their relationships, on their, like, life. For some reason, I don't really know why.
I was gonna say, why on earth? This is so fabulous. You were such an amazing person, but I do not know why anyone in the right mind would come to you with relationship advice.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would think of that.
So, like, I don't know. I think maybe some of it has to do with, I think a lot about, like, my emotions, and so they think that I know how to talk to people, which I don't. I'm just kind of myself, and if people like me, then... But like, also, there are no hard and fast rules to human connection, so...
Exactly.
Like, people, like, that's what I tell people, like, think about it. Like, you seriously, you are an intelligent person, you're, like, what you should do first, before you ask me, is seriously, like, think about this by yourself and interrogate. Like, and then I talk to them a little bit, I'll have a conversation with them first, and I'll be like, see how we're like, kind of interrogating, like, this belief, or see how we're interrogating, like, this assumption that we're making. I think that philosophy helps build good relationships. It helps, like, determine, like, whether or not I'm, this relationship is good for me, or whether or not, like, the ontology of self, I think, actually. I said ontology is not an emotional discipline, but I take that back now. The ontology of self, like, who are you? And like, who are you if not your relationships?
Yeah.
That's emotional.
So beautiful too.
Yeah.
I would
elegant,
say,
yeah,
100%. I would say part of this makes me so giddy because I think of myself as a very, STEM-based person.
Mm-hmm.
I think when most people think of me, they see me mostly in STEM. And the reality is, I don't often get to talk. I don't often get to bring up epistemology. I don't often get to talk about Camus, or get to talk about, the literature I love and the things that I do outside of STEM, because I think, I do spend so much of my time talking about that stuff, but I love conversations like this because I get to do that. I get to show that there's more to me than just that science side. But additionally, I think this is so interesting because this just came back around in my head again. I think a good way to look at philosophy is that it is taking the lived experience and emotion and turning it into logic. And want to know what went through my head when we first started this kind of like the philosophy side of this? I wonder if this is a tool we can use to educate men on, the issue of feminism. We're translating it into a language they can understand. We're taking these emotions and translating it into logic. And I'm wondering if this is a tool that we can use to our advantage.
No, 100%. I mean, I think personally that's the route that I tend to go down. Like I said before, it's hard because like time is like linear. So
believe it or not, the STEM side of me wants to tell you that is very much not the case.
Really?
Oh, time is not linear at all. From an astrophysics perspective, not in the slightest.
Well, I guess it's like relative, but like, does time even exist?
Well, kind of, yes. Time is simply just another, how, like, imagine, like, you have, like, an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. An x-coordinate and a y-coordinate could very well just be known as a x-coordinate and a time coordinate. Every single set of coordinates has a time coordinate, whether the data shows it or not.
Yeah, like, every point in, like, when they specify, like, let's, like, a specific point in space, like, that point in space is actually a set of points that vary throughout time. Like, if I tell you, like, go to this birthday party, like, go like to this address, like this, like, or this, like, these coordinates, right? These coordinates, that's not one place. That's actually like a line of possible,
precisely. Like, when you look at a point of space, just a one-dimensional point in space, over the course of a time, if you flip it on its side, it's a line. No, one.
You said point.
Yeah, one point.
No, points are zero-dimensional.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I just thought of points as one-dimensional.
The way I like to think about it is, like, with lines are, so, like, a line is one-dimensional, but it's generally embedded in 2D space.
Yeah.
So we think of that as, like a two-dimensional object.
Interesting.
Or, like, we would call that, like, a manifold. I think I could be wrong.
Yes, we actually deal with manifolds. I was just actually did my final, and they asked some questions on manifolds as well. But yes, precisely. But, that point over the space of, time, if you flip it on its side, it becomes a line.
Yeah.
It existing there over every single point in time is a line. It is, as we call it, its world line. Yeah. Now, its world line is technically a little bit different, but regardless, it existing over that time.
I mean, that line, like, we don't know what space that line exists in. It could exist on a sphere. It could exist on, like, a saddle.
Exactly. But what matters is the fact that even the one time coordinate, one space coordinate is just the same as two space coordinates.
Yeah.
When you understand that a time coordinate is just another space coordinate. And that's the whole idea of space-time, right? It's blending the two. Minkowski, I just did an entire rant to my dad about this on the phone after my final about just trying to explain how curved space-time geometry is a real thing.
Yeah, like,
because it blew my mind.
People like we so often think of, like, Euclidean geometry, which is like geometry on like a flat surface, right? Like, people think that two parallel lines will never cross. But then you think of, like, geometry on a sphere, like, yes, they will. Like, they'll always cross at the North Pole.
Exactly. That's the thing, is people say, a triangle, this was one of my favorite examples.
Yeah, the 180 degrees,
yes, a triangle has 180 degrees, but when you put a triangle
on a sphere,
you get more than 180 degrees.
Yeah, and that is personally why I think, so, like, in math, I'm a pure math guy, so, like, I don't know a lot of applications, honestly, but I know, like a lot of like pure math. And so in pure math, like, we tend to deal with, like, we have these selves,
the number two as an object.
Exactly. And so we can ask, okay, what makes a set the natural numbers, right? Because, for example, the Roman numerals, they behave the same way as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but they're just different symbols. So what, like, structure, what, like, rules does a set need to satisfy for it to be called the natural number. And there's 5.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Specifically, I'm so happy you specifically used the word set, because this is exactly what's running through my mind. There is a game that I absolutely love called Set. And you can search it up online as Set with Friends. And it is one of my favorite games. And basically, it's all about figuring out either what is all the same or what is all different about a certain thing. And so
I know this game. Yeah. I used to play this game. Yeah.
I love that, where you have the squiggles, the circles, and the diamonds. Yes. Oh my god, I could play that for hours on end. But the thing is, one of the things that when you mention the number 2, you look at 2 of anything. You look at 2 apples, 2 golf balls, and 2 puppies. And the one thing that you can say is in common with all 3 of them is that each of them have 2, and that proves that 2 is in fact an entity in itself, because we are able to say that that is a singular thing. The existence of 2 things together is enough for us to shape the idea that it is its own entity. And I think that is so cool. And I admire how into math you are, because
Thank you.
I pretend like I don't like math, because math frustrates me. And I think, honestly,
it frustrates me too.
Exactly. But I think that there's
what I
something,
mean.
Exactly. I think it's so beautiful though too. And like if I had the kind of passion for math that you did, I would go into it for the rest of my life, because it is so beautiful and so fun to talk about.
I want to get into math for the rest of my life, but I also don't want to be poor.
Yeah, and you also
I want to be like a math professor.
That is so understanding. You could try and, the issue is, my thought with math is how much more research is there to do with math.
There's a lot.
Exactly. There's so much that you don't know about.
Yeah, the more math I learn, the more I realize, like right now I'm learning a field of math called measure theory, which is all about, can you take a subset of the real line?
Yeah.
Can you take a subset? Is there a function, right, where you input a subset of the real line, for example, like 0, 1, and it'll tell you how long that subset of the real line is. So for example, like when you plug in the interval, all the numbers between 0 and 1, right? That interval, that you plug it into that function, you'll output 1. If you plug in 0, 1, and also 2, 3, like union, you'll get 1 plus, you'll get 2, right? And it turns out that no function exists. Because there's always going to be sets that can't be measured. And they're called Vitali sets. And because it, basically you say, okay, is there a function that satisfies these 4 rules? If you input an interval, you get the length of the interval. If you input disjoint intervals, so intervals that have nothing in common, you just add up the sizes of each of them, and it turns into a sum. And also, if I take 0, 1, and I shift all the points over by a certain amount, it'll have the same measure. And that last one, translation invariance, the fact that if I have an interval and I shift it over, right, it'll have the same length. That's where everything breaks down.
Yeah. And I have two comments on that. First of all, you know what just came into my mind, and I want to know if this is a branch of mathematics that exists. If I wanted to know what every number between 0 and 1 added together is, what number would it be?
So
is it infinity?
No, it's yes. It diverges. So it turns out that this is measure theory adjacent. So it turns out that there's 2 types of infinitely many types of infinity.
Yeah.
You know this?
Yeah, it makes sense. When I think about it, when you try and quantify infinity, you can't. There's infinity minus 1 is not a real number there. So you have to see difference. There's a difference between infinity in the way of a graph goes up to infinity, and infinity in the way of what I just said, where
exactly. Infinity, in terms of a limit, right? That we call a member of the extended real numbers. Infinity in terms of a size of a set, that is called the cardinality, right, of a set. And so there are different sizes of infinity. For example, do you think there are more even numbers or natural numbers?
When we say natural numbers, that is
0, 1, 2,
those
3.
are whole numbers. Yeah.
Yes.
I would imagine natural numbers.
So no, they have the same size.
Interesting.
So would you agree, if I could pair two, let's say I have 2 sets, 2 collections of things. If I could pair them up in a 1-to-1 correspondence, for example, let's say my ID and I'm just gonna imagine there's 3 dogs, right? and there's 3 cats. They have the same size because I could pair each dog with a cat in this like 1-to-1 correspondence. If I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, you know, I would have to map one dog, like one cat would have to be mapped on twice.
Yes.
Right? So those sets don't have the same size. So in other words, if I could show this 1-to-1 correspondence between the naturals and the evens perfectly, then they have the same size. And there's an easy 1-to-1 correspondence.
How,
Pair
though?
each number with its double, and pair each even number with its half. You pair 0 with 0, 1 with 2.
Because anything that's doubled is going to be an even number.
Yes, an even number, and that's so elegant.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, and so they have the same size.
Interesting.
But
that is so crazy. That just blew my mind. That is so insanely interesting. I'm going to be thinking about this for the next, like, month now.
But
oh my
do you want
God.
to blow your mind a little bit
Yes.
more? Okay, so there are more numbers then between 0 and 1 than there are natural numbers.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me because, you know, you break it down, you have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, but then you also have 0.01, 0.012.
And the argument is, by the way, is that every real number, like, and I get what you're saying there. That's a good, like, intuition. But if you want to make it more formal with this, like, 1-to-1 mapping type thing, take all the numbers between 0 and 1. Like, let's say I generate them in a list. Because technically, if you're listing something, you're pairing it up with natural numbers. You're pairing the first element with 0, second with 1.
So if we
can list it, then it has the same, like, in an infinite list, then it should have the same size of the natural numbers, right?
Yeah.
So generate like a bunch of these numbers between 0 and 1. Let's say 0.789532, 0.76666321, etc., etc., etc. Now take the first number on the list, the one that pairs with 1, or the one that pairs with 0.
Yeah.
Change the first digit of this number. So let's say it was 0.12. Now let's say it's 0.2. We're making a new number now.
Yeah.
Take the second number on the list. Let's say it's like, and change the second digit of the second number. So now we have a new number whose first digit differs from the first number and whose second digit differs from the second number. So this new number is different than the first number and the second number. Are you with me?
I feel like you may have lost me a little bit.
Okay. Like, imagine I make a new number by taking the first digit of the first number and changing it.
Yeah.
The second digit of the second number and changing it.
Okay. So you're adding it to each one.
Yeah, kind of.
But it's making one number.
Yeah, I'm like kind of like slowly constructing this number by taking.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. All real numbers go on for infinity. Even 1/2 is 0.5 followed by infinitely many zeros.
Yeah.
Square root of 2 is 1.41. Yeah, whatever. Like, but the thing is, this new number will differ from each number on the list by 1 decimal place. So therefore, the list isn't complete. There's a number, in fact, infinitely many numbers that aren't on the list.
That number that had just been added hadn't been on the list yet.
Yes.
That's so cool. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And that actually does kind of bring me back to the other thing I was going to mention is do you mind if I bring up your tattoo on the, on the thing? I know that, like, you've had, like, a lot of people mention this to you, and I have a feeling you've probably had, like, a lot of people tell you that it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, on one hand, like, you know...
Well, it was a bad idea in that I did it really, like, unsafely. But...
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, you definitely should have probably had, like, a more sterile environment than, you know, the Smith Center. But... I think on one hand I'm like, oh, you know, like, you know, like, I think people worry about dumb tattoos and all that, but, you know, I admire the passion, and quite honestly, I've considered getting physics formulas tattooed.
Good for you.
I don't tell people that, but I'm terrified of needles, right? I don't even have my ears pierced. I really want to get them. My parents are like, please do it already. And I keep making bets to all my friends that when they do it, I'll do it. I've gone through my best friend and her older brother. I told both of them, each at different times, that when they got their ears pierced, I would go with them.
And did they?
Yeah, and then I chickened out.
My God.
And then I'm waiting for the third kid who's about to go get her ears pierced.
No time like the present.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I might as well juke out the third one, too. You know? Like, might as well complete the trilogy, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I have a Pinterest board in my phone that's just tattoos I would get if I wasn't, like, scared by needles and also just, like, really, really indecisive. And I can't commit to one, but there's definitely, I have some, you know, like, physics concepts and formulas and, you know, a couple different things like that. And I have other stuff that's, you know, more average tattoos. I would like a small Scrabble letter H for my grandmother, who I grew up playing Scrabble with, and her name was Harriet.
My great-grandmother's name was Harriet.
Oh, yeah.
My middle name is Harry, for that reason.
Such a Jewish name, right? Yeah. But I grew up, playing, Scrabble with her, and so when she passed, that, there's also that, yeah. Or, she passed a couple of years ago, that's why I've been thinking about getting it. Or, I've considered maybe a small lighthouse or a small manta ray, because I'm very connected with the ocean. I dive, as I know you do as well.
Yeah.
And, marine biology is a big passion of mine. But even the ones that are probably more considered normal. Mm-hmm. I have physics ones and physics concepts.
Yeah, personally, I agree. I think that, I would never get, a sleeve. I would never get, like a dragon or something, but I would get something, if something that's personal to me, my sister was asking me, do your
parents know about it yet?
Yeah.
What was their thought?
They were concerned for my impulse control. But my sister was asking me, you really want to keep this when you're, old and wrinkly? And I said yes. Because, when I'm...
my grandmother got buried in a Jewish cemetery here. You'll be fine. Yeah. They don't really check.
Yeah. But also, I heard that's a myth, actually.
What?
That they don't bury you if you have a tattoo. I heard that's a myth.
Well, I mean, listen, my grandmother got buried fine. She had two, so...
Yeah. And also, I think, though, if it's a testament to who you... who you are, I think there's something very beautiful about wearing your history on your sleeve. It's very, vulnerable, and it's very, very authentic, and I think it's very beautiful.
I also think that I never understand why it is so normalized for things, such as, as you said, like a sleeve of a dragon is so normalized, but something like a math equation gets so gawked at,
I mean... I don't know if people are gawking at me because it's a math equation. I don't even know what people are saying. Quite frankly, I don't care.
I think if it was something like some kind of mythological creature, or maybe some kind of wolf or something, I don't think people would be thinking it's nearly as weird. I think people would question.
I don't personally. I just don't care what people are saying. I'd like to know, what are they saying?
I mean, I would say, I imagine my initial thought was, this dude got a calculus equation tattooed on him.
Yeah.
But, through this conversation, I realized that, you are so passionate about it, and, there are things that I am so passionate about that I would completely get tattooed on myself. And so, I think that there are plenty of people out there who have tattoos on stuff that they are not nearly as passionate about. So I think it's, very admirable that, you know... You're right, part of it, I think, is definitely an impulse control thing, but, there are plenty of people who would get, impulsively some random animal or something that doesn't really matter nearly as much as, math does to you, and so...
Yeah, and even if, I stop caring about math, even if, one day I slowly lose interest...
Math is never gonna wrong you, let's go with that.
Yeah, it's still a big part of my life, and who I am, and I'm sure physics, is the same for you, and because... even if you, let's say, lose your interest in physics, mm-hmm. even if you lose your interest in, the humanities or STEM, or just, these sorts of, which I don't think you will, I
have no clue where my life will take me, right?
Yeah, none of us do, and with, AI and everything, I don't even know if I have a job guaranteed.
People they look at me like I am insane. One of the tattoos that I've considered getting would be Minecraft related.
Oh, that's so... Cause you played Minecraft when you were a kid, or
It is not just that. I grew up elementary school. I had no friends. I went to a small private school with 50 kids in the grade, and I had...
This is literally my experience as well with Minecraft.
I had no friends, and so Minecraft YouTubers were what I grew up on.
Same.
I met the best friend, love of my life. Her name's Ruth. She is so near and dear to me. I could talk about her forever, and I met her.
An online friend, or
no, in person.
Oh, wow.
I met her through we had taken swim classes together, and then ended up on the same swim team, and it was because I overheard her talking about Minecraft ocelots. And additionally, through COVID, we weren't able to see each other very much, and we'd spend, I'm gonna be honest, we'd spend 4 hours a day on the phone with each other playing Minecraft together, and I don't think our friendship would have made it through. I don't think I would have been nearly as creative as I am. I don't think I would have developed the way I was through elementary school without it. And so there's small things, I'm not going to go and get some, like a creeper, but, listen, there's people who do that and good for them. But there's the Minecraft end poem. I cry every time I read that. I burst into tears when I read that, and I made my parents read it. I make anyone who is not, if you are listening to this and you have not listened and pulled read through the end credits, like poem that they read at the end, when you defeat the Ender Dragon.
I've actually only defeated the Ender Dragon, legitimately, twice.
Oh, I think I've probably done it once.
Oh, yeah.
But even then, it's so beautiful, and if you had published that somewhere, no one on any planet would ever think that it came from a video game.
Yeah.
And one of the most common big lines is, "And the universe said I love you because you are love," and I would get that tattooed on me. I genuinely would.
Oh my god!
Everything about it is so deep.
I told my parents I wouldn't get another tattoo. Which, I actually didn't say that. I said I wouldn't get a tattoo, in this, dangerous way.
Yeah.
And I would consult them the next time I considered, doing something like this. Which is true. Mom, if you're listening to this, I love you very much. And I think, personally, if I do decide to get another tattoo, I would get Fundamental Theorem of Calculus Part 2 here on my right arm. So I have Part 1 on my left arm, Part 2 on my right arm.
I actually do kind of love that.
Stokes Theorem, somewhere else, which is, generalized Fundamental Theorem of Calculus. And, then I would also get, I might consider, doing that. I would get, and the universe, because Minecraft, for me, it was such a fundamental part of my childhood as well.
And I think, people think about it and they're like, well, you might regret it when you're older, and I don't care what happens to the game. I don't care if the creators turned out to be terrible people. I don't care.
Well, we know, Notch is, a transphobe.
Yeah, he is a terrible person, but regardless of that, I have so much of who I am. This is so weird to say to people, and I'm so proud. I'm so happy that you are not judgmental about this and you understand this. I owe so much of who I am to Minecraft, which is such an insane sentence.
Yeah.
But I owe so much of who I am.
Yeah. I mean, good for you.
It was so much of my development.
Yeah, 100%. Anything that happens, anything that's a big part of your development will no doubt shape who you are. Will shape who you are. Especially when you're at that young age, that critical period. What I am curious though is for you, do you find that most people that you are around will judge you? Because you said I'm glad that you won't judge me on this, which I won't.
Yeah.
About the Minecraft thing?
I mean, the thing is, there's people when there's tattoos, I feel like people are becoming more and more accepting of tattoos, but I think there's still the situation of, you have to know that it's really something you want, and they always worry, what if you regret it? And I think people they hear something, especially people of older generations, they see a video game, and they see a teenager wanting a tattoo from a video game.
Yeah, it sounds with no context.
It sounds insane, but when you get into it and you realize just how much of who I am has to be with that and has to do with that, and even to this day still does, it doesn't sound as crazy.
Yeah.
And, if I outright just say, hey, yeah, I want to get a Minecraft tattoo, it sounds weird. But when you sit down and explain, the thing is, a lot of people aren't willing to sit down and listen to the explanation.
Yeah, it's really sad. And it's sad that people don't like having conversations like these. It's sad. And to tie it, to circle all the way back around. Yeah. I think part of that has to do with our mental health, for both men and women, because on one hand we have people over intellectualizing their emotions and understanding them so well that they don't even feel them, and then on the other side we have people suppressing their emotions.
Exactly.
And those are equally bad, in my opinion, for your
100%.
spiritual health, for your mental health.
100%. The thing is, you're right, at the end of the day, it all does come back to this, and I think it all does come back not only to, the whole idea of the, expansion of men's mental health, and especially through breaking that down of feminism, but also every single thing we've seen to say today has, at the end of the day, came back to empathy.
Yeah, I think if we had a more, understanding society, I think that would solve a I think we should, like, on my blog, I have this post, "The Children Yearn for Acid," where, like...
That is amazing. I need to read that.
You should. It's basically, like, it's a metaphor. It's about, like, how, like, all of our institutions are spiritually bankrupt. I'll leave it in the description.
I want to read that, actually. That's not even like go watch it. Like, with a title like that, I can't not read it.
I appreciate that. But, like, we're so, like, spiritually, like, everybody is so burnt out and apathetic. And I think that is one of the biggest problems of our society, apathy.
Oh, 100%. I have a paper that I started writing a while ago that I think you would love to read.
I will.
It is about the difference of good literature and great literature. And it's basically, I remember the opening line is something like, good literature is soothing and, it's soothing and it calms the mind, and great literature, I believe the exact words I wrote was, great literature is like a bat to the head.
Yeah.
And that is the difference.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of, I think that totally sounds like
it kind of like takes it takes you apart.
Exactly. And only once you have been taken apart and be able to put yourself back together again is when you finally understand that, and I think all of that is so beautiful. But as we said, it really does go all back to empathy. And I did just have this amazing thought on what you should call this episode.
What?
Empathy and empirics.
Ooh, that's
because
good.
We've talked about empathy and we've talked about math and we've talked about the statistics of all of it. I think that's just such a cool name.
Okay, let's do it.
I think that's so amazing.
Empathy and empirics.
I love it.
There we go.
I had to mention that.
Okay. This has been a wonderful conversation.
It has as well. I really hope, I know you're in Long Island, I'm in Kansas, but I hope that, if you decide you want another episode, I'm happy to, do a long distance call and be back on the...
That sounds amazing.
This is amazing. And
hopefully
I have not
one day
had a
when this podcast is like, hopefully one day it's like a big thing.
Yes,
and
oh my
you'll
God.
be back on.
Oh, absolutely. I have not had a conversation this great in a very long time.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing.
We
Thank
just
you.
fist bumped.
Yes, we did just fist bump. Hold on, we have to do a sound effect again.
Boom.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
No, of course. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Of course.
This has been Elite Ball Knowledge.